I'm Samantha, 28 years old, and I've spent my entire life standing in my sister Madison's shadow. Everyone always saw her shine while I faded into the background. I never expected her wedding day would be any different, just another opportunity for comparison. But when she publicly humiliated me during her reception speech, something unexpected happened. Her new husband Elliot stepped in and silenced the entire room. Before I dive into this story that still makes my heart race, drop a comment letting me know if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Don't forget to like and subscribe to join our community of resilient souls. Growing up as Madison's younger sister was like living as a permanent understudy to the star of the show. She was 4 years older, infinitely more beautiful, and effortlessly accomplished at everything she touched. While Madison was blessed with our mother's striking blue eyes, perfect smile, and natural grace, I inherited my father's more ordinary features and awkward demeanor. This physical contrast was just the beginning of a lifetime of comparisons. Our childhood home was filled with evidence of Madison's superiority. The living room mantel displayed her dance trophies, academic awards, and pageant crowns, while my modest achievements barely warranted refrigerator space. On Madison's 16th birthday, our parents threw an elaborate party with nearly 100 guests, a professional DJ, and a custom-made dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. When my 16th birthday rolled around 2 years later, I received a small family dinner and a card containing a gift certificate. "We're just a bit stretched this year, sweetie," my mother explained while simultaneously planning Madison's extravagant college graduation celebration. School provided no refuge from these comparisons. Teachers who had Madison first always gave me that look, part disappointment, part pity, when I failed to meet the standards she had set. Madison was such a natural at calculus, my math teacher commented during a parent-teacher conference. Samantha clearly needs to apply herself more. The fact that I maintained a solid B+ average while managing my severe test anxiety was never acknowledged. Meanwhile, Madison's A's were celebrated with dinner outings and public praise. When I discovered photography in high school, I finally found something that felt uniquely mine. I saved up for my part-time job to buy my first real camera, and I spent hours learning techniques, practicing shots, and developing my eye. When I showed my parents my first photo exhibition at a local coffee shop, my father glanced at the images and said, "That's a nice hobby, Sam. But you should focus on something that could become a real career, like Madison's marketing degree." That stinging dismissal stayed with me as I stubbornly pursued photography anyway, eventually building a modest freelance business shooting weddings, family portraits, and the occasional small commercial job. Meanwhile, Madison ascended quickly through the ranks at a prestigious marketing firm, becoming their youngest executive at 29. Her career achievements were announced at family gatherings like breaking news, while my photography clients and creative growth went unmentioned. My personal life fared no better than my professional one. Madison dated the captain of the debate team in high school, followed by the student body president in college, and then a series of increasingly successful professionals. I had fewer relationships, each one ending with some variation of the same problem: my insecurity. My most recent boyfriend, Derek, broke things off after 8 months with brutal honesty. "I can't be with someone who needs constant reassurance, Sam. It's exhausting always telling you that you're good enough." What Derek never understood was that I'd spent my entire life being told, explicitly and implicitly, that I wasn't good enough. Those messages don't disappear overnight. When Madison announced her engagement to Elliot Bennett, a successful architect from a well-connected family, nobody was surprised. It was exactly the kind of perfect match everyone expected for her. The engagement party was held at an exclusive country club, and I arrived alone, having been single for 3 months since Derek's departure. "Samantha." Madison air-kissed my cheeks when I arrived. "I was worried you wouldn't make it. You look comfortable." Her eyes flicked dismissively over my best dress, the one I'd spent 2 weeks' worth of photography earnings to purchase specifically for this event. "Congratulations, Madison," I said sincerely because despite everything, I did want her to be happy. "I can't wait to meet Elliot." Meeting Elliot was the first surprise in what would become a series of unexpected moments. While Madison circulated among guests, Elliot actually took time to talk to me, asking thoughtful questions about my photography. "Madison mentioned you're a photographer," he said, sipping his champagne. "What kind of work do you do?" When I hesitantly showed him my portfolio on my phone, expecting the usual polite disinterest, he studied each image with genuine attention. "These are remarkable, Samantha," he said, lingering on a black and white landscape I'd taken during a rare personal trip to Montana. "You have a unique perspective. The way you capture light is really special." For someone who had received precious little validation for my creative work, Elliot's sincere interest was both refreshing and slightly disorienting. We ended up talking for nearly 20 minutes before Madison appeared at his side, her arm sliding possessively through his. "I see you've met my little sister," she said, her smile tight. "Don't let her bore you with all her photography talk." "Not at all," Elliot replied easily. "Samantha's quite talented. You never told me how good she is." A flash of something annoyance? Jealousy? Crossed Madison's face before she laughed lightly. "Oh, Sam's always been creative. Come on, honey, my boss just arrived and you have to meet him." As they walked away, I caught Elliot glancing back at me with a small, kind smile. It was the first time I could remember someone in Madison's orbit recognizing something valuable in me that she had missed. Despite years of living in her shadow, I felt genuinely happy that my sister had found someone who seemed not only successful, but also kind. I just never expected that kindness would eventually extend to me in ways that would change everything. The months leading up to Madison's wedding were a masterclass in subtle degradation. It started with the bridesmaid invitation, delivered over brunch with our mother present. "Of course I want you in my bridal party, Sam," Madison said, sliding an elaborate invitation box toward me. "You're my sister, after all." The implied obligation in her tone wasn't lost on me, but I was genuinely touched to be included. My eyes welled up slightly as I opened the beautiful custom box containing a miniature bottle of champagne and a card asking, "Will you be my bridesmaid?" "Thank you, Madison. This means a lot to me," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Don't cry, Samantha," Madison said sharply. "It's just a bridesmaid invitation, not a marriage proposal. Though I suppose those might be equally rare for you." She laughed, and our mother joined in with an uncomfortable chuckle. Later that day, I learned that Madison had asked her college roommate Rachel to be her maid of honor. When I asked her about it privately, trying to mask my hurt, she sighed dramatically. "Sam, being maid of honor requires organization, attention to detail, and reliability. After that disaster with Cousin Katie's baby shower you planned last year, I just couldn't risk it. This is my wedding day we're talking about." The baby shower she referenced had been challenging only because Madison had repeatedly changed the requirements and taken over various aspects at the last minute, causing confusion among the other planners. But I swallowed my defense and nodded, accepting my secondary role with as much grace as I could muster. The bridal shower in April was my first major test. I'd spent weeks creating a handmade photo album documenting Madison and Elliot's relationship, collecting images from their friends and family, and arranging them chronologically with beautiful calligraphy captions. I'd stayed up for 3 nights straight to finish it, wanting to give my sister something meaningful that showcased my talents. When Madison unwrapped it, surrounded by her friends in her maid of honor's expensively decorated backyard, she barely glanced at the contents.
"Oh."
A scrapbook. Her tone made it sound like I'd given her a partially eaten sandwich. "It's actually a hand-bound photo album," I explained, my voice smaller than I intended. "I collected pictures from everyone important in your lives, and that's nice, Sam. Very crafty." Madison set it aside without looking through it and reached eagerly for the next gift, a luxury handbag from her work colleague that elicited genuine squeals of delight. Later, I overheard her in the kitchen with Rachel and 2 other bridesmaids. "I know I should be grateful, but a homemade album? Who even does that anymore? Everything's digital now. It's so Sam to be stuck in the past century." Their laughter cut through me like glass shards. I slipped out the back door and cried in my car for 10 minutes before composing myself enough to return to the party. The dress fittings were another minefield of insecurities. Madison had selected beautiful sage green dresses for all the bridesmaids, except me. When I arrived at the boutique, the consultant pulled out a completely different style in a significantly darker shade. "There must be a mistake," I said, confused. "This doesn't match the others." "No mistake," Madison said breezily, examining her own exquisite white gown in the mirror. "I just thought this would be more flattering for your body type. The other style would emphasize certain areas you might want to downplay." She made a vague gesture toward my hips and stomach. I felt my face flush with embarrassment as the other bridesmaids exchanged glances. "Madison, I'd really prefer to wear the same dress as everyone else," I said quietly. "Trust me, Sam. I'm doing you a favor. You'll thank me when you see the photos." The alterations appointment a month later was even worse. Madison insisted on attending and continuously made suggestions to the seamstress. "Can you take it in more at the waist? Add more structure to the bodice? Maybe we could add a little jacket." By the time the alterations were complete, the dress was less flattering than it had been originally, making me look matronly and frumpy while the other bridesmaids would look youthful and elegant. The bachelorette weekend in Miami should have been a chance to bond, but it quickly became clear that I was an afterthought. Despite having helped plan activities that Madison would enjoy, I found myself repeatedly excluded. "We only reserved 6 spots for the yacht excursion," Rachel explained apologetically when I noticed my name missing from the list. "Madison thought you wouldn't mind sitting that one out since you get seasick." I hadn't been seasick since I was 12, a fact Madison well knew. That night, while getting ready for dinner, I overheard Madison in the adjoining hotel room. "Mom practically insisted I include Sam in everything," she was saying to someone. "You know how she is, but she's your sister, Madison." As if that obligates me to have her hovering around looking miserable in all my bachelorette photos. At least she's not in the yacht pictures. I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from making a sound as tears streamed down my face. The systematic exclusion continued throughout the weekend, with inside jokes I wasn't part of and activities I learned about only through Instagram posts after they happened. By the time the rehearsal dinner arrived the night before the wedding, I was emotionally exhausted from months of subtle and not-so-subtle put-downs. The event was held at an upscale restaurant with a magnificent view of the city's skyline. I was seated far from the main wedding party, at a table with distant relatives and friends' partners. During a moment when I stepped outside for air, Elliot appeared beside me on the terrace. "Everything okay, Samantha?" he asked, his voice concerned. "Fine," I replied automatically. "Just needed some fresh air." "You've seemed subdued throughout all the wedding events." He hesitated. "I hope you know how much it means to have you as part of our day." The sincerity in his voice nearly broke my carefully constructed composure. Before I could respond, Madison appeared, her eyes narrowing slightly at finding us alone together. "There you are, honey. The toasts are about to start." She looped her arm through his possessively. To me, she added, "You should come inside too, Sam. Try to look happy for once. It's not your funeral, it's my wedding." As they walked away, I seriously considered not showing up the next day. I could claim illness, food poisoning, anything to avoid another day of being Madison's emotional punching bag. But the thought of the family fallout, the disappointment, and the confirmation of Madison's narrative that I was unreliable kept me from acting on the impulse. Instead, I returned to my seat, practiced my camera smile, and prepared for what would undoubtedly be one of the most challenging days of my life. The morning of Madison's wedding dawned with picture-perfect weather, as if even the universe conspired to give her the flawless day she expected. I arrived at the luxury hotel suite at 7 a.m. sharp, garment bag in one hand, professional-grade makeup kit in the other. As a photographer, I'd picked up enough beauty techniques to do my own makeup for client meetings and the occasional date. I'd spent hours practicing the exact look that would photograph well without drawing attention away from the bride. The suite was already buzzing with activity. The hairstylist was setting up her station, the makeup artist unpacking her supplies, and Rachel directing the placement of champagne flutes and breakfast pastries with military precision. Madison sat in the center of it all like a queen holding court, already wearing her monogrammed silk robe, her hair in Velcro rollers. "Sam, finally," she said, glancing at her diamond-encrusted watch, though I was exactly on time. "You can put your things in the corner. We need the main area clear for photos." I nodded and moved toward the designated corner, which was actually partially in the bathroom. Rachel intercepted me with a tight smile. "The photographer will be here in 30 minutes for getting ready shots," she informed me. "Madison thought it would be best if you get dressed last since your dress is different. For continuity in the photos." Translation: I was to be excluded from as many professional photos as possible. "Actually," I began, summoning courage from some hidden reserve. "As a photographer myself, I know that." "Sam, please don't start with your amateur photography advice," Madison interrupted from across the room. "We've hired the best wedding photographer in the city. Just follow the schedule Rachel created." The dismissal was so casual, so complete, that the other bridesmaids didn't even register it as unkind. They continued chatting excitedly, sipping mimosas and taking selfies. I retreated to my corner, unpacked my dress, and waited my turn for hair and makeup. 3 hours later, all the bridesmaids were being fussed over by the styling team while I sat scrolling through my phone. Finally, the makeup artist approached me. "You must be the sister," she said kindly. "I'm Tina. Let's get you ready." As she worked, I closed my eyes and tried to center myself. I was here for Madison. This was her day. I could endure anything for 24 hours. "You have gorgeous bone structure," Tina commented as she applied contour. "And your eyes are such a unique shade of green." "Thank you," I replied, surprised by the compliment. "Tina, focus on fixing her uneven eyebrows," Madison called from across the room where she was having her hair styled. "And maybe go heavier on the foundation to cover those freckles." I saw Tina's expression flicker with discomfort, but she professionally adjusted her approach, without commenting. When she finished and I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself beneath the heavy makeup that Madison had essentially dictated. "Is it possible to lighten it a bit?" I asked quietly. "Don't touch it, Tina," Madison instructed before the makeup artist could respond. "Trust me, Sam, you need that coverage for the professional photos." I swallowed my objection and thanked Tina for her work. Once all the bridesmaids were dressed in their matching sage gowns, I slipped into the bathroom to put on my darker, matronly version. Looking in the mirror, I could see exactly why Madison had chosen this dress for me. Next to the others, I would look like a chaperone rather than a sister. As the bridesmaids gathered for pre-ceremony photos, my mother appeared at my side. She looked elegant in her silver mother-of-the-bride dress, her makeup flawless, and her hair expertly styled. "You look nice, Samantha," she said, though her eyes reflected uncertainty about the heavy makeup and unflattering dress. She lowered her voice. "I know Madison can be difficult, but today is so important to her. Please try to be understanding if she seems stressed." I recognized the familiar pattern. Madison's behavior excused, my feelings invalidated, all in the name of keeping the peace. "I've been understanding for 30 years, Mom," I replied, more sharply than intended. Seeing her face fall, I softened. "I'll be on my best behavior. I promise." "That's my girl." She patted my cheek. "Your father and I appreciate how supportive you're being." The irony of being praised for tolerating mistreatment wasn't lost on me, but I forced a smile and nodded. As my mother walked away, the wedding planner began organizing us for the procession to the ceremony location in the hotel's garden. Just as we were lining up, Madison stopped the photographer, who was capturing candid getting-ready moments. "For the family portraits later," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I think we should do some with just Mom, Dad, and me before adding Sam and the extended family. For variety." The photographer nodded professionally, but I caught his glance of confusion. It was standard to photograph the complete immediate family together first. "Actually," I said, unable to stop myself, From a composition perspective, it would create more balanced images if— Sam, stop, Madison snapped. Not everyone wants photography advice from someone who shoots budget weddings for couples who can't afford real professionals. The room went silent. Even Rachel looked uncomfortable with this direct attack on my livelihood. I felt heat rising in my face as tears threatened. Without a word, I excused myself and headed for the nearest bathroom, locking the door behind me. Staring at my overly made-up reflection, I gave myself the sternest pep talk of my life. You can do this. It's one day. Don't let her see you break. Just get through the ceremony, the reception, and then you can go home and never attend another family function if you choose. A soft knock interrupted my self-coaching. Just a minute, I called, quickly dabbing at my eyes with a tissue, careful not to smudge the industrial-strength makeup. Take your time, dear, came an unfamiliar elderly voice. These fancy hotel bathrooms always confuse me too. When I opened the door, I found a tiny, elegant woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She smiled at me, and something about her face seemed vaguely familiar. You must be Samantha, she said warmly. Elliot's grandmother, Beatrice. I recognize you from the photos Elliot showed me. Elliot showed you photos of me? I asked, confused. Of course. He speaks very highly of your photography talent. Said you have an exceptional eye for capturing genuine emotion. His words, not mine, though I agree completely. Her kindness was so unexpected that I felt tears threatening again. I blinked them back rapidly. That's very kind of him to say. Kindness runs in that boy's family, Beatrice said with a wink. His grandfather and I just celebrated 60 years of marriage, and do you know the secret? She leaned closer conspiratorially. Dignity. Treating each other with dignity, even during disagreements. Especially during disagreements. She patted my arm gently. You have dignity, Samantha. Don't let anyone take that from you today. With that enigmatic advice, she excused herself to find her seat for the ceremony. Her words resonated deeply as I rejoined the bridal party, standing straighter despite the unflattering dress. Dignity. I could maintain my dignity regardless of how Madison treated me. With that thought firmly in mind, I took my place in line, prepared to walk down the aisle with as much grace as I could muster. The garden ceremony space was transformed into something from a fairy tale. White roses and hydrangeas cascaded from archways, crystal chandeliers hung from sturdy oak branches, and a white carpet runner led to an elaborate floral arch where Elliot waited with the officiant and groomsmen. Hundreds of guests were already seated in white Chiavari chairs, a string quartet playing softly in the background. One by one, the bridesmaids processed down the aisle, each paired with a groomsman. As I began my solo walk, Madison had claimed there weren't enough groomsmen for me to have a partner. I kept my eyes forward, focusing on maintaining the practiced smile I'd perfected over years of family gatherings. When I passed Elliot, he caught my eye and gave me a genuine, warm smile, not the polite acknowledgement I expected, but something more personal. That small kindness helped me make it to my place in the lineup without faltering. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. The quartet transitioned to the wedding march, guests rose to their feet, and Madison appeared on our father's arm. She was, without exaggeration, breathtaking. Her custom gown featured hand-embroidered lace, a sweeping train, and thousands of tiny crystals that caught the sunlight. Our father looked both proud and slightly intimidated by the vision beside him. During the ceremony, I watched Elliot's face as he recited his vows. The love in his eyes was unmistakable, and for all her faults, I knew Madison had found someone who truly adored her. When they were pronounced husband and wife, I applauded with genuine happiness for them both, momentarily forgetting my own hurt feelings in the beauty of the moment. The cocktail hour that followed was held in the hotel's lavish courtyard. While Madison and Elliot took photos with family, including the separate ones without me that Madison had insisted upon, I found myself drifting between groups of guests, belonging to none. Whenever I approached a conversation circle, it would mysteriously close before I could join, or the topic would shift to something excluding me. "Samantha, there you are," called my Aunt Judith, motioning me over to where she sat with two other relatives. Grateful for the invitation, I joined them. "So," Aunt Judith began, looking me up and down, "no +1 today? What happened to that nice young man you brought to Christmas? Derek, was it? We broke up a few months ago," I admitted. "Such a shame. He seemed like he had good prospects." She sighed dramatically. "And how's that photography hobby going? Still doing that instead of finding a real career?" "It's not a hobby, it's my profession," I corrected gently. "I'm actually booking quite steadily now." "Well, not everyone can be as ambitious as Madison," my Uncle Patrick chimed in. "Some people are just more creative types." He said creative like it was a terminal diagnosis. I excused myself as quickly as politeness allowed and found a quiet corner near a spectacular flower arrangement. From this vantage point, I could observe without participating, a skill I'd honed to perfection over the years. When the wedding planner began ushering guests toward the ballroom for the reception, I followed the crowd, clutching my small evening bag like a lifeline. The reception space was even more elaborate than the ceremony. Crystal centerpieces towered over each table, custom lighting created a romantic ambience, and a massive dance floor gleamed in the center of the room. I searched for my name card at the family table near the front, but couldn't find it. Confused, I approached the wedding planner. "Excuse me, I can't seem to locate my seat. I'm the bride's sister." She checked her tablet, frowning slightly. "Samantha Brooks? You're at table 19. There must be a mistake. The family is at table 1. I said, my stomach sinking. "No mistake. I have you at 19 with the bride's work colleagues." Table 19 was not only far from the family table, but it was positioned behind a large column that partially obscured the view of the head table. I stood frozen, staring at my name card next to people I'd never met, trying to process this deliberate exclusion. As I contemplated whether to simply leave the reception entirely, I felt a presence beside me. Elliot had approached so quietly I hadn't noticed him until he spoke. "Is everything all right, Samantha?" "I'm apparently seated with Madison's coworkers instead of with family," I explained, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the hurt coursing through me. Elliot's brow furrowed. "That's not right. Let me speak with the coordinator." Before I could protest, he was conferring with the wedding planner, who looked increasingly uncomfortable as their conversation continued. A moment later, Elliot returned with the planner in tow. "There was a misunderstanding with the seating chart," he explained smoothly. "We're moving you to table 3 with our grandparents and closest family friends. It's right next to the family table." The wedding planner quickly relocated my place card, apologizing profusely, though we both knew she wasn't responsible for the misunderstanding. As Elliot escorted me to my new seat, he spoke quietly. "I'm sorry about that. It shouldn't have happened." The simple acknowledgement of the slight, the first time anyone had validated my experience instead of explaining it away, nearly undid my composure. I managed a grateful nod before taking my seat among Elliot's kind-faced grandmother Beatrice and other older relatives who welcomed me warmly. Throughout dinner, I caught Madison glancing at my table with barely concealed annoyance. She'd clearly orchestrated my banishment to the far reaches of the reception, and Elliot had undermined her plan. I braced myself for the inevitable fallout, but for now, I was simply grateful to be treated with basic dignity, as Beatrice had advised. As the meal concluded and the DJ announced the beginning of toasts, I straightened in my chair, mentally preparing for whatever came next. Little did I know that the real test of my dignity was only moments away. The reception was in full swing by the time the DJ announced it was time for speeches. Rachel approached the microphone first, champagne flute in hand, looking picture-perfect in her sage green bridesmaid dress. "I've known Madison since our freshman year at Northwestern," she began with practiced ease. "From the moment she walked into our dorm room with 3 matching suitcase sets and a detailed plan for redecorating our standard-issue furniture, I knew she was special." The crowd laughed appreciatively as Rachel continued her speech, highlighting Madison's determination, intelligence, and loyalty. She told amusing anecdotes about their college adventures, Madison's meteoric rise at her marketing firm, and finally, the romantic story of how Madison and Elliot met at a charity gala. To Madison and Elliot, Rachel concluded, raising her glass. May your marriage be as perfect as you both are. I love you both. Applause filled the room as Madison rose to hug her maid of honor, air-kissing her cheeks and whispering something that made them both giggle. I clapped politely, relieved that the speeches seemed to be concluding without incident. But then Madison herself stepped forward and took the microphone, her smile dazzling under the reception lights. I just want to say a few words, she announced, and my stomach immediately clenched with apprehension. Madison was not on the official toast list. This was an impromptu addition. First, I want to thank everyone for being here today to celebrate Elliot and me, she began smoothly. Especially our parents, who have always supported me in everything I've done. She raised her glass toward our parents, who beamed with pride from their seats at the head table. My father wiped a tear from his eye as my mother clutched his hand. I'm so blessed to have such incredible friends, an amazing new husband, and the perfect day we've all worked so hard to create, Madison continued, scanning the room with a practiced smile. Then her gaze landed on me, and something in her expression shifted subtly. And, of course, I have to mention my little sister, Samantha. The spotlight literally swung in my direction as Madison gestured toward me. I felt heat rising in my cheeks as hundreds of eyes turned to find me at my table. Sam and I have such interesting childhood stories, Madison continued, her voice taking on a theatrical quality. Like the time, she was so jealous of my sweet 16 party that she actually hid all my shoes right before the event. Uncomfortable laughter rippled through the crowd. This incident had never happened. It was a complete fabrication. Or during my college graduation when she showed up in an identical white dress to mine, claiming she didn't realize white was reserved for the graduates. Another falsehood. I'd worn a blue dress specifically chosen to complement Madison's graduation robes. But my personal favorite was Sam's epic meltdown at my engagement party when she realized she was the only one without a date. Remember that, Sam? You locked yourself in the bathroom for 30 minutes while Mom tried to coax you out. I had indeed excused myself to the restroom that night, for 5 minutes to compose myself after overhearing Madison mock my dress to her friends. There had been no meltdown, no intervention from our mother. With each fabricated story, Madison's tone grew more openly mocking, and the laughter from the guests became increasingly uncomfortable. I sat frozen in my seat, unable to defend myself without causing a scene, watching as my sister systematically humiliated me in front of everyone we knew. And now here's Sam, still trying to figure out her life, while I'm living my fairy tale, Madison continued, her smile never wavering. Still taking pictures for anyone desperate enough to hire an amateur, still wearing clothes that don't quite fit right. We did our best with that bridesmaid dress, didn't we, girls? The other bridesmaids shifted uncomfortably, a few forcing awkward smiles while others looked down at their plates. Still single after scaring away every boyfriend with her neediness. What was it your last boyfriend said, Sam? That being with you was exhausting? The fact that she knew this private detail, something I'd never shared with her, meant she'd been speaking to Derek behind my back. The betrayal of that realization was almost worse than the public humiliation. I guess not all sisters can be blessed with beauty and brains, Madison concluded with a theatrical sigh. Poor Sam still figuring her life out while I'm living my fairy tale. The room had fallen completely silent. No more uncomfortable laughter, just horrified silence as the guests witnessed something crossing the line from wedding toast to public evisceration. I felt tears welling in my eyes, my carefully applied makeup now surely streaking down my face. My legs seemed to move of their own accord as I began to stand, intending to flee the ballroom and the hundreds of pitying stares. Just as I was rising from my chair, motion at the head table caught everyone's attention. Elliot had stood up and was walking purposefully toward his new wife. For a brief, terrible moment, I thought he was going to join in the mockery, that this had been some sort of planned humiliation. Instead, he gently took the microphone from Madison's hand. His expression was calm but resolute, his jaw set in a way that immediately silenced whatever Madison had been about to say next. "I think that's enough reminiscing for now, sweetheart," he said quietly, though the microphone carried his words throughout the ballroom. Madison's smile faltered. "I was just telling some funny stories about—" "They weren't funny," Elliot interrupted, his voice firm but not angry. "And they weren't true." The room collectively held its breath. I froze halfway between sitting and standing, stunned by this unexpected intervention. Elliot turned to face the guests, his expression softening. "If you'll allow me, I'd like to say something about my new sister-in-law, Samantha." I slowly sank back into my chair, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. While planning this wedding, I've had the privilege of getting to know Samantha, and I've discovered what many of you may not know. Elliot's voice was clear and confident. She is one of the most talented photographers I've ever encountered. Her work captures emotion and light in ways that professionals with decades more experience haven't mastered. Madison's face had transformed from confident superiority to confused discomfort. She reached for Elliot's arm, but he continued speaking. "What you also might not know is that despite being excluded from many of the wedding preparations, Samantha has been nothing but supportive. She created a beautiful handmade album documenting our relationship that my grandmother described as the most thoughtful gift she'd ever seen." Beatrice nodded emphatically from beside me, patting my hand under the table. "Samantha has also been secretly helping me plan a surprise honeymoon photo shoot for Madison as my wedding gift to her. Spending hours researching the best locations in Bali, connecting me with local photographers for recommendations, and creating a detailed shot list to ensure Madison looks her absolute best." Madison's expression shifted from discomfort to shock. This was clearly news to her. That's the kind of sister Samantha is, someone who uses her talent to support others even when she's not appreciated. Elliot paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "In my family, we believe that how you treat people reveals your character. Madison is still learning that from me, and I'm sure she regrets her comments tonight." He turned to look directly at Madison, whose face had flushed deep red. "Don't you, sweetheart?" Put on the spot, Madison had no choice but to nod, attempting to salvage the situation. "Of course. I was just joking around. Sam knows that." But everyone in that ballroom knew the truth. There had been no joke. Only cruelty that had backfired spectacularly. Elliot raised his glass. "So I'd like to propose a toast to Samantha, for her talent, her kindness, and her grace under pressure. We're lucky to have you in our family." "To Samantha," echoed through the ballroom as guests raised their glasses, many looking relieved to have a way to move past the uncomfortable scene they'd witnessed. As Elliot handed the microphone back to the DJ and music began playing to transition to the first dance, I sat in stunned silence, tears now flowing freely down my cheeks. But for the first time in my memory, they weren't tears of humiliation or inadequacy. They were tears of vindication and relief at finally being seen. The reception continued after Elliot's unexpected speech, but the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted. Madison and Elliot performed their first dance with mechanical smiles, her body language stiff with barely contained anger. As they moved across the dance floor to their carefully selected ballad, I could see Madison whispering furiously to Elliot, who maintained his composed expression while responding too quietly for anyone to overhear. I remained at my table, accepting quiet words of support from Elliot's grandmother Beatrice and the other guests seated with me. Several of Madison's friends who had witnessed her cruelty over the years, but never intervened, now stopped by with awkward expressions and fumbling words. "Your photography really is amazing," said one college friend I vaguely recognized. "I followed your Instagram after seeing Madison's engagement photos. I had no idea you took those." I hadn't taken Madison's engagement photos. She'd hired an expensive professional, but I didn't correct the misunderstanding. The fact that this woman had sought out my work independently was validation enough. As the evening progressed, I began to relax slightly, sipping champagne and even managing to eat a few bites of the gourmet wedding cake. Madison remained at the head table, pointedly avoiding looking in my direction while maintaining her bride's smile for everyone else. When the father-daughter dance concluded and general dancing began, I decided it was probably safe to slip away. I'd fulfilled my obligation, endured the worst of it, and now deserved to retreat to the quiet of my hotel room. Just as I was gathering my small clutch purse, the DJ's voice came through the speakers. And now, the groom would like to share a special dance with his new sister-in-law. My head snapped up to see Elliot standing before me, hand extended, a kind smile on his face. The spotlight found us, as conversations around the room hushed. "May I have this dance, Samantha?" he asked. Stunned and uncertain, I glanced toward Madison, who was watching with a tight expression from the edge of the dance floor. After a moment's hesitation, I placed my hand in Elliot's and allowed him to lead me to the center of the floor. As the opening notes of "Wind Beneath My Wings" began playing, a song about unsung heroes who support others without recognition, Elliot guided me into a formal dance frame. "I hope this is okay," he said quietly for my ears only. "I wanted to make sure everyone saw that you're valued in this family now." "You didn't have to do this," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "Any of it. Standing up to Madison, this dance." "Actually, I did." His expression turned serious. "My younger brother was bullied throughout school. Our parents taught us that witnessing cruelty and doing nothing makes you complicit." We turned slowly on the dance floor, and I became aware that other guests were watching with expressions ranging from approval to tearful emotion. "Madison's not going to forgive this easily," I warned, knowing my sister's capacity for grudges. Elliot's smile returned. "Probably not. But she needs to learn that I meant every word of my vows today, including the parts about honesty and respect applying to all our family relationships." As the song continued, I caught glimpses of various reactions around the room. My parents watched with complex expressions, pride mixed with discomfort, and perhaps a dawning recognition of their own complicity in the dynamic between their daughters. Madison's friends huddled together, whispering behind their hands. And Madison herself stood with arms crossed, her perfect makeup unable to disguise the fury in her eyes. "I'm sorry you've been treated this way for so long," Elliot said as the song neared its conclusion. "But things will be different now, I promise." The simple acknowledgement of years of mistreatment, something my own parents had never provided, caused tears to well in my eyes again. "Thank you," I managed, my voice thick with emotion. "Not just for tonight, but for seeing me. Really seeing me." As the song ended, Elliot surprised me further by pulling me into a brotherly hug before leading me back to my table. Guests applauded politely, and several approached afterward to compliment my photography or express interest in booking me for events. The narrative had shifted. I was no longer just Madison's plain sister, but a talented professional who had been unfairly maligned. For the remainder of the reception, I noticed a remarkable change in how people interacted with me. Conversations didn't stop when I approached. People asked genuine questions about my work. A distant cousin even apologized for never challenging Madison's characterization of me over the years. Most surprising was the approach of my father late in the evening. He awkwardly took the seat beside me during a slow dance, fiddling with his bow tie in the way he always did when emotional conversations loomed. "You know," he began hesitantly, "I always thought your photography was just a phase. Something you'd grow out of." I braced myself for another dismissal of my chosen career. "But Elliot showed me your portfolio last week. Really showed me, made me actually look at it." He cleared his throat. "It's extraordinary, Sam. The way you capture people, it's a gift." "Thank you, Dad," I replied, genuinely touched by this belated recognition. "I haven't always been fair to you," he continued, staring at his hands. "Your mother and I. We thought Madison needed more attention because she was so demanding, but maybe we got it backward." Before I could respond to this unprecedented acknowledgement, Madison appeared before us, her smile brittle. "Daddy, they're about to do the bouquet toss. I need you for photos." As my father excused himself, Madison leaned down, her voice low and threatening. "This isn't over, Sam. You've embarrassed me at my own wedding." "I think you managed that all on your own," I replied with a calm I didn't know I possessed. "Congratulations on your marriage. Elliot seems like a wonderful man." Her eyes widened at my refusal to be intimidated, and for a moment, she seemed at a loss for words. Then she straightened, smoothed her dress, and stalked away toward the waiting photographer. As I watched her go, I realized something profound had shifted within me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel diminished by Madison's anger or threats. I had been publicly validated, yes, but more importantly, I had found my own voice and dignity. When the reception finally wound down and guests began departing, Elliot sought me out one last time. "Breakfast tomorrow before we leave for the honeymoon," he suggested. 9 a.m. in the hotel restaurant? "There are some things I'd like to discuss about those Bali photos." I nodded, grateful for the continued connection and curious about what he had in mind. As I finally retired to my hotel room in the early morning hours, exhausted but oddly energized, I realized this wedding day had indeed changed everything, just not in the way I had expected. The morning after the wedding, I arrived at the hotel restaurant precisely at 9, unsure what to expect. Elliot was already seated at a corner table, dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt, looking remarkably fresh for someone who'd been celebrating until after midnight. Of Madison, there was no sign. "Madison's sleeping in," Elliot explained as I took a seat across from him. "She had quite a bit of champagne after you left." I nodded, grateful for her absence. "Thank you for meeting with me." "About the Bali photos." "There are no Bali photos," Elliot interrupted gently. "That was something I came up with in the moment. Though it's not a bad idea, actually." "Oh." I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment. "So you wanted to meet because I owed you an explanation." Elliot leaned forward, his expression serious. "What Madison did last night was unacceptable. I couldn't stand by and watch it happen." "Most people would have," I pointed out, "especially on their wedding day." Elliot shook his head. "My younger brother Julian was severely bullied throughout middle and high school. Not just by classmates, but by our cousin who lived with us. Our parents never intervened. They called it boys being boys and told Julian to toughen up." His hands tightened around his coffee cup. "When Julian was 16, he attempted suicide. That was our family's wake-up call. My parents finally confronted what had been happening under their roof, and we all went to therapy. I promised myself then that I would never be a bystander to that kind of cruelty again, no matter how socially uncomfortable the intervention might be." "I'm so sorry about your brother," I said softly. "Is he okay now?" Elliot's expression lightened. "He's excellent, actually. Finished medical school last year and just started his residency. But he still carries those scars." A server approached to take our breakfast order, providing a moment to process this revelation. After she departed, Elliot continued. "When I first met Madison, I only saw her confidence, her drive, her charisma. Those are real qualities she possesses, and they're part of why I fell in love with her." He hesitated. "But as I got to know her family, especially you, I began to see patterns that concerned me. The way she speaks to you, the constant put-downs, the exclusion. It's been that way our whole lives," I acknowledged. "My parents always made excuses for her behavior." "That became clear to me at the engagement party," Elliot nodded. "I've been trying to address it privately with Madison, but she gets defensive. Last night, she crossed a line I couldn't ignore, even as her new husband." "What happens now?" I asked, voicing the question that had kept me awake much of the night. "Madison doesn't forgive easily. She'll see this as both of us betraying her." "Now we establish new patterns," Elliot said firmly. "I made it clear to Madison after the reception that I won't tolerate that kind of behavior toward you or anyone else. She was angry, yes, but she also knows I'm serious." Our food arrived, and we ate in thoughtful silence for a few minutes. Finally, Elliot spoke again. "There's something else I wanted to discuss. My firm is looking for a photographer for our new project portfolio. It's a significant contract, 20 high-end architectural projects over the next year, with full creative control. Your aesthetic would be perfect for it. I nearly choked on my orange juice. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you an opportunity to submit your portfolio to our selection committee, he corrected. It would be inappropriate for me to directly hire my sister-in-law. But I can make sure you get a fair consideration, which I suspect is all you need. The possibility of such a prestigious contract, one that could legitimize my business in the eyes of my family and provide financial stability, was overwhelming. Why would you do this for me? I asked, suspicious of charity disguised as opportunity. Because I've seen your work, and it's exceptional, Elliot replied simply. Our firm needs a photographer with your eye for composition and light. This isn't charity, Samantha. It's business. We finished breakfast discussing the practical details of the submission process. As we prepared to leave, Elliot hesitated. Madison and I return from our honeymoon in 2 weeks. Would you be willing to meet with us then? I think it's important we address what happened directly, all three of us. The thought of confronting Madison made my stomach clench, but I recognized the necessity. I'll be there, I promised. 2 weeks later, I sat nervously in Madison and Elliot's elegant living room, perched on the edge of a designer sofa as Madison entered the room. She looked tanned from the Bali sun but tense, her arms crossed defensively as she took a seat opposite me. Elliot followed with a tray of coffee. Thank you both for agreeing to this conversation, he began diplomatically. I think it's important we clear the air. There's nothing to clear, Madison said immediately. I was stressed at the wedding, I had too much champagne, and I made some inappropriate jokes. End of story. They weren't jokes, I said quietly but firmly. They were deliberate attempts to humiliate me, and they've been happening our entire lives. Madison's eyes flashed with familiar anger. Oh, please, don't be so dramatic. You've always been oversensitive. Madison. Elliot's voice held a warning note. We agreed to listen and reflect, remember? My sister exhaled sharply but fell silent. I seized the opportunity to say things I'd held back for decades. I've spent my entire life being compared to you and found lacking, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Every achievement, every interest, every relationship of mine has been dismissed or criticized. At your wedding, you deliberately excluded me from family photos, seated me away from family, and then publicly mocked me with false stories. I need to understand why. Madison stared at her perfect manicure for a long moment before responding. You always got to be the nice one, she finally said, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. The sensitive one. The creative one. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to always be the successful one, the perfect one? The one who can never make a mistake or show weakness. So, you tore me down to feel better about the pressure you felt? I asked, genuinely trying to understand. I don't know. Madison looked away. Maybe. It just became our dynamic. And then it was easier to keep you in that box. Elliot remained silent, allowing us this long overdue conversation. I never wanted to compete with you, I told her. I just wanted to be valued for who I am. Well, you certainly got that at my wedding, Madison replied bitterly. Everyone's talking about how wonderful you are now. That's not what I wanted either, I insisted. I never wanted to humiliate you. I just wanted the cruelty to stop. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, oscillating between defensive accusations and moments of genuine vulnerability. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful hugs or instant forgiveness, just the beginning of honest communication between two deeply disconnected sisters. As I prepared to leave, Madison stopped me at the door. The architectural photography contract. Elliot said you're submitting your portfolio. I tensed, expecting a dismissive comment about my qualifications. Your urban landscapes are your strongest work, she said instead. Make sure to feature those prominently. It wasn't an apology, but it was something, acknowledgement of my talent and a small attempt at constructive support rather than undermining. Thank you, I replied, genuinely surprised. I will. The following months brought gradual but significant changes. I did indeed win the architectural photography contract, which led to other high-profile jobs and financial stability I'd never experienced. My parents, perhaps prompted by Elliot's example, began showing genuine interest in my career, even attending a gallery showing of my work in November. Madison and I established a cautious new relationship, not instantly close or completely healed, but marked by growing mutual respect. Our conversations became less loaded with old patterns, and while she occasionally slipped into critical comments, she caught herself more often than not. The most surprising change came during Thanksgiving dinner at our parents' house. As we gathered around the table, my father raised his glass for a toast. "I want to acknowledge something important," he began, uncharacteristically emotional. "Your mother and I haven't always been fair to both our daughters. We enable dynamics that hurt our family, and for that, we apologize." My mother dabbed at her eyes as she added, "We're so proud of both of you for different reasons, as it should be. Madison's drive and accomplishments, and Samantha's creativity and compassion. We should have celebrated your differences instead of creating competition." Madison and I exchanged glances across the table, hers surprised, mine grateful. Elliot squeezed my hand under the table in silent support. Later that evening, as I helped clear dishes, Madison approached me in the kitchen. "I've been seeing a therapist," she admitted quietly. "Elliot suggested it after the wedding. I'm learning that my need to put you down comes from my own insecurities." "We all have insecurities," I acknowledged. "I've spent years believing I wasn't good enough because I wasn't you." Madison's expression softened. "And I've spent years terrified of not being perfect, of losing the one thing I thought made me special in this family." We weren't instantly best friends. Decades of patterns don't dissolve overnight. But standing in our parents' kitchen, I realized something profound. I no longer needed Madison's approval to feel worthy. I had found my voice, my confidence, and my place, not in her shadow, but in my own light. The wedding that I had dreaded as another exercise in humiliation had instead become the catalyst for transformation, not just for me, but for our entire family. Elliot's refusal to be a bystander had broken a cycle that might otherwise have continued indefinitely. As I drive home from family gatherings now, I no longer rehearse all the ways I fell short or replay cutting remarks in my mind. Instead, I focus on the genuine connections I'm building. With my parents, with Madison, and with myself. Have you ever stood up for someone being mistreated, even when it was socially uncomfortable to do so? Or have you been the person someone unexpectedly defended? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe to join our community of sharing and healing, and hit that notification bell to never miss another story of resilience and growth. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply refuse to participate in cruelty, whether directed at ourselves or others.